In this video, I'm going to show you how I animated this winter scene. In this episode, I'm using a design from the amazingly talented Megan Pelto. I absolutely love how charming and playful her work is, so I was thrilled to get to animate this piece. It was drawn in Procreate and sent to me as a PSD to prep it for After Effects. I made sure that all the layers and all the mountains were separated so we could get some nice parallax. I imported that PSD into After Effects and then spent some time organizing it, color coding the layers into groups, and then parenting certain elements like the character and the dog to this first hill here. The main animation in this scene is going to be a tilt down from the sky to reveal the characters, and add some subtle motion to the clouds, the dog, and the character as well, so it maintains the peaceful tone from the design. The parallax and the camera move downwards is going to be the biggest part, so that's what I tackled first. You can handle creating parallax two ways in After Effects. You can make your layers 3D objects, set them to their correct depth, scale, add a camera, and move the camera to get your effect, or you can animate the position more manually. I much prefer to do the latter in almost all circumstances. Not all, but generally, I find the camera in After Effects to be more trouble than it's worth. The main downside of using the camera is that it takes away your control to manage the design. If I were to do this scene using the 2.5D method with a camera, we would have to push back the mountain really far in Z space, and then scale it up to match the design, and then do that for all the layers. And this can get really messy to manage if the anchor points aren't all centered to the comp. It's just going to get much more difficult to match the design, with the scales and positions not being consistent. Design, I think, is the most important element of any motion design or animation, so I want to have complete control over it if I can. So to animate parallax with just the position properties, I'm going to move the closer objects more and the more distant objects less. I've labeled my hills hill 01, hill 02, etc., with the closest hill being hill 01. And I've parented hill 02 to hill 01, and parented hill 03 to hill 02, etc. So each hill is parented to the one closer, which is going to make adjusting the amount of parallax a bit easier. Hill 01, where our character is standing, is going to have the biggest movement, so let's tackle that first. I'm going to keyframe its position around 6 seconds, which is where our camera move is going to stop. And then at the very start of the comp, I'm going to move it down out of frame. This actually might be a good opportunity to hide all of our sky elements as well, because they're just going to be distracting. So let's push this further down to hide it completely from view. I'm going to add some easing to this later, but I just want to get a sense of how much movement I want in the scene. I'm pretty happy with this, and we can always adjust it later. For the parallax to work, each layer going backwards through the hills has to move slightly less than the layer in front of it. So what I'm going to do is keyframe all of their final positions at this endpoint. I'm going to select hill 2, and then at the start, I'm just going to nudge it further upwards. And let's zoom out so we can see that a little bit better. And because all of the hills backwards are parented to it, we can see our mountain in the background starting to pop up slightly. If we play that back, we can now see some slight parallax between the first and the second hill. It's pretty subtle, but once we have all the layers parallaxing, it should be more obvious. So let's go and move up hill 03 a little bit as well. I'm just nudging this with our arrow keys. Let's do the same for hill 04. And each time we'll see our mountain get closer and closer into view. Hill 05 and all the others. Now if we play it back, there's some nice parallax between all of our layers. And if there's too much movement between any of these objects, say if I think there's too much parallax between this mountain and this second to back hill, I can just go to the start of the comp and move the amount of distance this back mountain moves down slightly. Now there's a bit less parallax and the mountain and this hill look a lot closer. And we can adjust those to suit our taste. And here's what we end up with. This might seem less intuitive than setting up a 3D camera, but for a scene like this, having the control over every layer is important to me, and this might just be a new method that you can add to your magical parallax toolbox. From here, we can add some easing. I'm going to take hill 01 into the graph editor, go to the speed graph, add some easing by clicking Easy Ease down here, and I really want this to ease into its final position, so I'm going to drag this handle out and move this one back to the start. That's probably a bit fast. I'm going to push this back a fair bit and let's see how that goes. There we go, that's much nicer. I'm going to use a free plugin called Ease Copy to copy those ease values to the other keyframes in the composition. So I'm going to select copy. I'm actually going to drag all of these keyframes back over as well, and then select all the keyframes involved and click paste. Now all the easing is applied to those layers and the movement is in sync. From there, I tweaked that easing just a touch. I added a bit of parallax to these trees at the front as well, and added in our background elements and a bit of parallax on those clouds too. Now, this is most of the animation done. From here, it's just filling out all the individual animations of each element, the clouds and the characters. But before we get to that, a quick word from today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an absolutely enormous, growing online community with courses on a huge range of creativity, productivity, and business skills taught by some of the best industry professionals. And with a premium membership, you get access to all of their courses, which are growing every day. Those include Mastering Illustrator with DKNG, the absolute masters of vector animation, Coloring Masterclass with Vito Nye, which is an absolutely great breakdown of how she uses color in her artwork, and Animating Ease with Jake Bartlett. Easing in After Effects, understanding the graph editor is one of the biggest hurdles that most motion designers and animators come up against. Understanding the graph editor, mastering how to use it, will really put your skills into the next level. I wish I had this resource from Jake Bartlett when I first started learning. Investing in your skills is the best investment you can make. And an annual subscription to Skillshare is just $10 a month. Less than $10 a month. But on top of that, Skillshare is giving my viewers 2 months free. 60 days with unlimited access to all of their courses by using the link in the description. You won't regret it. For the human, I added some slight rotation to his head as if he was looking around and taking in the beautiful mountain vista, and then added some subtle movement to his arm as well, just using a puppet pin, setting 3 pins, one at the elbow, and just moving it back slightly, and then forward to its final position, getting this movement. And then I animated his ski wand. I animated this using a rotation property, just making sure and moving the anchor point down to the bottom here. So it pivoted and just made sure that pivot lined up with his arm. For the dog, I added some slight rotation to the head, again taking in the majestic views, and then I animated his tail frame by frame. For me, animating this type of thing in frame by frame is a little bit quicker than the trial and error of trying to figure all this out with shape layers. I like to animate frame by frame in Photoshop, using the free plugin AnimDesin 2 to get this toolbar up, which really comes in handy. I did a rough with just a line, trying to make it have a little whipping wave motion, where the base of the tail is always slightly ahead of the end. Once I was happy with that, I outlined the fur around it and then cleaned it up, filling it in on another layer. You can import a PSD with a timeline from Photoshop straight into After Effects, and it comes in like this with the animation in there already, so there's no need to render out a movie or a sequence for each different element. I did the clouds in that same PSD. You can maybe do this with a wave warp stacked with some distort effects in After Effects, but again, I wanted to have complete control over how every frame looked to match the design, and that was worth it for me to step into frame by frame for the clouds. For this big billowy cloud sky shape, I did the roughs for this frame by frame, making each hump sort of move slowly towards becoming the next hump, so they would line up and it would loop. I took that rough into After Effects and cleaned it up with some shape layers. I made a keyframe at the start, in the middle, and then at the end, following our roughs and making sure in between the keyframes is still lined up roughly with our motion. Now I cleaned this up using shape layers because I wasn't sure how slow I wanted this motion to be, and this way I could easily adjust that with the vector shapes rather than drawing an ungodly amount of frames. So to adjust that speed, I took that comp, added a little fill effect to change the color, and then I right clicked and went to time stretch and changed it to 600, making it 6 times as slow. Now if we play it back, it's got a much more subtle motion which isn't going to distract from the main scene. Then I duplicated that a couple of times so it would loop, and I added an adjustment layer with posterized time set to 12 frames per second over the top, so it still looked a bit frame by frame and not super smooth. We can see there's some little errors down here where the shapes don't match up, and again in the middle here there's some rough parts, but those are all going to be hidden by the mountain, so I wasn't too worried about that at all. The last thing I did to everything in the main comp is to add an adjustment layer with 2 effects. We place that at the top of everything, and the first effect is a posterized time, which I set to 12 frames per second, to make the whole thing look more traditionally animated. Now, I wasn't sure if this would make the camera move look a bit too staggered and choppy, so that's why I didn't add it earlier, and why I added posterized time to the clouds individually, but I did end up liking it looking like this, so I kept it. I also added a turbulent displace effect, with the size set to 3 and the amount set to 30, and I also animated its random seed as well, with the expression time times 4, and what this does is add a slight boil to everything, which is really small, and you just get these little gritty jumps, which makes the whole thing look a bit more drawn frame by frame, and mirrors this really sort of distressed brush that Megan used to design it. I spent around 6 hours animating this all up, and here is the final product.
I've made a short playlist of some related videos that I think you'll enjoy if you've made it this far. I'll see you in the next video, and please consider subscribing if you'd like more of these videos every week.